Awesome. Welcome to our next session of the day. I'm just going to give it like another few seconds for people to pop on in. And then we'll get started. Awesome. Welcome everyone to our next session of the day. What's your superpower? Really excited to introduce Dr. Erin Rainey for this session. In this session, she will discuss the power of a strengths-focused mindset, exploring practical methods to identify strengths and showcase how to link those strengths to a career in the health professions. If you have any questions throughout the session, feel free to put it either in the Q&A box or in the chat box. If we don't get to your questions, we highly encourage you to go to Dr. Erin Winnie's booth, Midwestern University College of Pharmacy, after the session, and then you can continue chatting there. And this session is also going to be recorded, so if you missed it, it'll be in the sessions tab after this workshop is over. So without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Dr. Rainey.
Hey, well, thank you very much. I'm really pleased to be here with all of you. Hopefully you've been learning a lot about our pharmacy profession, and now it's time to focus a little bit on yourself and how the two go together perfectly. So we're going to talk about superpowers. So I wanted to start out with a quote from Tom Rath, who is a researcher in the area of strengths. And he says, if you spend your life trying to be good at everything, you will never be great at anything. Now, I bring this up because as we look through our strengths-focused lens today at what we bring to the profession, we often are trying to split ourselves into a lot of different areas and try to be good at everything, really focusing on how to get better at everything and don't have kind of a filtered approach that can help us focus. So I hope that you'll enjoy thinking about things a little bit differently today. With that being said, we often focus on our weaknesses, and I think in our society, we are raised as kids into adults to think about how we can improve ourselves. And while that sounds amazing and is very important, we spend a good amount of our time and energy really trying to improve on our weaknesses and maybe just a little bit of time allowing for a focus on our strengths. So as we flip that a little bit today, I want to recognize that and also recognize that embracing our strengths does not mean that we ignore our weaknesses. It's all about trying to see how we can have a balance and take some of that energy and focus towards something that we might have not spent as much time on already. So what would be the benefits of strengths awareness? Well, the researchers know that for individuals who are in careers that feel most engaged and most satisfied, they state that they are engaged and satisfied because they can spend most of their day in their job doing what they are strong at, not spending time trying to get better at things. And that makes sense if we think about that. Because we're enabled to work within our strength zone, we might have better well-being and decreased burnout, which is a very hot topic these days as we plan our careers. And when we think about our ability to cope with stress and the ups and downs of life, if we are well aware of our strengths and have put a lot of time and effort into developing those, then we can have our most authentic and genuine approach to even coping during the hard times. Now, this all sounds great, and we will explore this more. And what the researchers also tell us is that many individuals are not aware of their strengths. Now, when asked, they might have a general idea what they're good at, but because we are often focused so much on improving our weaknesses, it isn't something that all of us have an easy time talking about. So let's think about that in a little bit more detail. All of you who are here today exploring pharmacy as a career are at different time points in that exploration process, is my expectation. And we might think about how strengths connect to the application process to pharmacy school, but also within our experience during pharmacy school as well. And these are just 4 areas that are easily connected to the topic of strengths. So when we're in the application process, we'll talk about how we can connect our strengths into our academic performance and also what our extracurricular experiences have told us about our strengths, as well as our career path and our interest in pharmacy and the ways that we network. But also we'll talk a little bit about how this applies during pharmacy school when you are happy to be in the program of your choice and you know those strengths, you can then apply them to all 4 areas as you advance within our career in pharmacy. So we always expect that question during an interview. And so as many of you are preparing for potential interviews in pharmacy programs, we know that being asked about strengths is common. It might be truly that exact question, like what are your strengths? But it might be embedded a little bit more into something like why should we choose you, or what makes you a successful pharmacy student candidate. Oftentimes when we're asked that question, it can be a little bit uncomfortable. We might have planned for some answers and common things that come up. And I have a role in interviewing candidates in my campus. We often hear things like, well, I'm a good communicator, or I'm organized, I'm enthusiastic, I'm hardworking. And we can't discount those. Those are absolute strengths. When they're that general and broad, it is hard to differentiate that type of strength from all the other students that are applying as well. So we're going to delve into how can we create an opportunity to identify our strengths, but also communicate them with a little bit more detailed language and confidence and authenticity. As we think about our strengths, it's really important, as I mentioned, to be purposeful and spend some time with this, far beyond our discussion today. So my hope is that we can set the stage for some reflection on your own. But being overly broad or vague does kind of set the stage in the interview for it to not really stand out from others. So we want you to stand out as you are explaining your interest in pharmacy school. So strength spotting is a term you may or may not have heard of. And strength spotting is identifying strengths, and it can be applied to ourselves, or we can be strength spotting in others, depending on our role as a mentor, or if you have a leadership role, for instance. We're going to talk about strength spotting for ourselves today. And there's 2 ways we can go about this. One is the very informal fashion and also formal. And so we'll talk about the informal process first. And that's through the process of self-reflection and some coaching questions. So let's take a look at what that might look like. Here are some examples of some reflection questions. Now, I listed 4 on the website that's at the bottom of this slide. There's a whole host of different types of questions we can ask ourselves. Now, I really hope that you take some time when you can really think and you're in a good mood and you have a way to reflect in writing, either electronically or good old pen and paper, and really think through some of these questions. So let's take a look. First of all, when do you feel most engaged and motivated? And when you think about that, what are you doing and what strengths are you using? Well, you might think that that's a pretty easy answer, but I would really like you to all think about, even today, what are you feeling engaged and motivated doing? What are you looking forward to today? Maybe you're having coffee with friends. Maybe you're going on a run after you're involved in the pharmacy fair today. Maybe there's a course that you really are excited about studying for. When you identify those things and you've written them down, then we need to break it down further. What are you doing in those activities and what strengths are you using? So for instance, if you are really looking forward to your exercise, is it because you have a strength of resilience or grit and you really push through and you are trying to run every single day? If you're looking forward to coffee with friends, is it because You are very social and you like being around people, or maybe you're very empathetic and you like to have deep conversations with others and you know you're going to be supportive of a friend later. So trying to delve into a little bit about why you are engaged in those, but also what strengths are you using? You can also ask yourself a question of thinking when you've been successful. Now, this might have been in a course, it might be something that happened at work, or maybe successful in navigating a relationship. And think about what strengths you were particularly using there. Maybe you work in a retail environment and you had to navigate a patient, or maybe you're in a general retail environment, a customer, and the customer is very upset. And you were able to calm the customer down and get through that process. What strengths were you using? Maybe you're empathetic. Maybe you are good at managing emotion. Maybe you were supportive of a coworker during that situation and you could read the room and see what the needs were. Those are all different reasons to be successful. As you think about that, you can add to it what skills you easily pick up. When we focus on strengths, we are trying to think about what comes naturally to us rather than trying to force ourselves to be good at something that's not natural. So what does come naturally to you? I would love to have been a professional basketball player. I'm a very tall person, but I have no athletic ability. And I could have spent my entire life trying to get really good at playing basketball. But my natural aptitude and skills was really in math and chemistry and science. And even though I wanted to play basketball, it really worked out much better for me to put all of my time and energy into the things that I was naturally good at. So what skills are you able to pick up on easily? And how does that kind of match with some of the other notes you've been taking about yourself with these questions? Regardless of how many questions you ask yourself and take notes on, I also recommend that you ask someone you trust. It could be a friend or family member, and have them describe the strengths that they see in you and write those down as well. All of this is information gathering. We're going to do more with it in a moment, but we want you to really be able to just brainstorm freely about what could be your particular strengths. Now, that's a very informal method. And we talked about the idea that there could be a formal way to have a strength assessment. These are just some examples of formal strengths assessments that are usually online. Some have a cost associated with them. Some do require a facilitator to provide them. And my bet is that some of you have taken some of these assessments before in your undergraduate coursework or perhaps in high school. There's the values and action character strengths. Clifton strengths are also known as Strengths Finder, Strengths Scope, Strengths Profile, and others. So what the formal strengths assessments allow is for a specific language and surrounding strengths communication that you might not be able to come up with for yourself in those informal strength spotting exercises. I'm going to talk about the values and action character strengths a little bit more, just to give an example of how this might be used. So as I mentioned, the values and action character strengths is one example, and there is an opportunity for a free online assessment for this particular one if you have interest in moving forward with it. But it characterizes 24 strengths in 6 categories, and you can see those 6 categories are wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence. Now, those words are big words, right? There's 24 strengths within them. And I just want to show you a little bit of an example of how those are divided out. So as we work or look at the first 3 categories, you can see things like kindness, honesty, curiosity are listed within these. All of the words listed here are common words to us, but the benefit of a strengths assessment is that as you learn about yourself, you're given a quiz that gives you maybe your top 5. And you might have some new words there that you hadn't thought of as strengths. Here's the remainder of those categories and the other end of the 24 that are possible. Things like fairness, humility, hope. Again, all of these are great. And what you might be thinking is, gosh, if I had only my top 5, I would like all of these. All of them sound great. And any strengths assessment that we take, there will be a tendency to think about the strengths that we don't have in our top 5. And that's that pull of looking at weaknesses that we're all so well trained to think about through our whole lives. Try to resist it. The idea of these strengths assessments is to think about the profile that we're given in our special top 5 and value that and enhance it and run with it versus worrying about the things that didn't show up. So we're going to talk about Andy and Jane, and we're going to think about both of them in the process of applying to pharmacy school. Now, if we look at Andy and Jane's top 5 strengths, we can see Andy with humility, gratitude, perspective, teamwork, kindness. I'd love to meet Andy. I would also love to meet Jane because she has humor, zest, curiosity, bravery, and creativity. I will tell you now that I've met many Andys and Janes over my career in pharmacy, and they've all gone on to be amazing pharmacists. So the exciting part about thinking through a strengths-based lens is that what you are naturally bringing to the table in your strengths can all be applicable within our amazing profession. We need to be able to create some mapping with that and understanding of it, though, to really maximize that opportunity. So many of you have done mind mapping before, again, pulling from elementary school into high school, etc. Let's think about that opportunity with strengths. So let's say that Andy is aware of his top 5 strengths, but we really need to do more with just knowing those 5. We don't go around with a bumper sticker saying what our 5 strengths are. We need to connect it. And let's say that Andy has a really important volunteer experience that he's been involved with, an organization that's very meaningful to him. Well, he can take that and then map his strengths to that volunteer experience and start building stories. Those stories are what is going to come up in your interviews and your letters of intent as you talk about yourself and why you want to be a pharmacy student. So we have our Andy's particular strengths of gratitude, kindness, humility, and perspective all link perfectly into, let's say, that volunteerism that he's been involved with. And he can talk about his special role within that based upon those strengths. We can also map a strength to the experiences in a different way. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see how we might work with Jane's strengths. So let's say we just take one of those, which is curiosity. And Jane thinks about the things she's been involved with in her undergraduate program. She has been involved with research. She also works, and she also does some student teaching or TAing for a class. And when she thinks about it, her strength of curiosity is really thriving in those 3 experiences, whether it's collecting data for research or if it's the fact that she launches and brainstorms a lot of work projects that others haven't thought about. And she also loves teaching. That's a part of learning and curiosity. You can see just the start of this. You imagine that if you have your top strengths and you have the language to label those, and then you take a full table's worth of paper and start drawing some maps. Take the experiences you've all invested in, whether it is work or extracurriculars or other types of experience, and start thinking about the connections to those strengths. When have you used your strengths, and when have those strengths really propped up one of those experiences in a way that's so genuine to you? Once you do that, then we can really answer those interview questions in a robust manner. So let's think about this. You know, those strengths-based questions can be very obvious, but also imagine how you can use your strength storytelling in questions about what was your favorite class? What types of projects do you like to do? What role do you take on in those projects? How do you manage stress? How would your friends or family describe you? Those questions are very common in any sort of interview, but if you have the language of your strengths and that webbing or that mapping to the experiences that you've had, you can really provide answers that are unique and very, very much allow you to stand out compared to the candidate that says, I'm a very organized person, right? You can start seeing that form. Many of you are familiar with response frameworks for interview questions as well. The STAR method, the CAR method, the PAR method as examples, where you are expected to describe a situation, what you did in that situation, and what was the result. It's a great framework to answer an interview question. Well, imagine embedding your strengths into that and talking about the situation through the lens of your strengths and what results and forward thinking you have because of that. It just adds an entirely new layer that, if it's consistent throughout, really shows that you've done a lot of critical thinking and reflection for yourself. So let's think about Andy and Jane in terms of them getting into pharmacy school. They're in pharmacy school and they're students in the classroom together. What I want to talk about now is just how this strengths awareness carries forward no matter what your next step is. So Andy, in terms of academics, can you imagine him as a classmate? He might take those strengths and of humility and perspective and teamwork and set up study groups. Also, you can imagine Andy would be the one that I'd go to because I'm worried about a test or I'm not feeling as confident. And his aptitude in these areas would be really well fit to that type of like peer counseling type of situation. What about Jane? Gosh, I'd love to be in class with her as well. And can you imagine humor being brought to the table when we're all stressed, or creativity in terms of how to maybe study, maybe some new ideas? What about who they will be as pharmacists? This is the really fun part, and I am a career coach within our program, also a pharmacist, but I love seeing the many different opportunities within our profession that match our students. And a lot of that is based upon strengths. So Andy, if I look at these strengths, I can think of him potentially a career towards oncology, let's say. Maybe that patient population would benefit so much from kindness and perspective and humility, and he might be really drawn to that type of pharmacy career. Well, that doesn't mean Jane can't have that career as well. So we don't want to identify everyone in a silo. But imagine Jane's strengths. Maybe she'll be an entrepreneur and launch a pharmacy business because of her creativity and her bravery in stepping out into the unknown. I would love to have Andy and Jane both part of my profession. Now, I've talked a lot about interviewing and kind of the opportunities of connecting in person, but realize that your letters of intent and letters of interest for programs will also be an important place to weave in those strengths. Use that mapping of your strengths to examples of your experiences and connect those strengths to the mission of your program. Get to know the program and why you want to be part of that pharmacy school, and link the strength there as well. And also, if you can communicate to me why your strengths will make you a great pharmacist and you've thought that through, I, as an interviewer, would be really impressed at the level of thought and engagement that you have and your intentionality to be a great pharmacist. So as we finish up here before our Q&A, I just want to make sure we recognize that strengths awareness does not require formal assessment. It can be done informally, but it does take time, and it takes the ability to have some reflection and really thinking about what are we engaged in the day, what do we love doing, and why. We might need some help from family and friends to kind of help build that language. Once you know some of your top strengths and you're sure you're not worried about what others have, remember this is all about taking it and running with it, then take the experiences that you've had, your extracurriculars, your work experience, your academics, and start really fine-tuning that mapping. How do all of these connect? Because as you are showing consistent themes and authenticity when you're answering your questions in your interview and in your letter of intent, those programs are going to see someone who is on that so thoughtful about the profession that you will really have a successful interview in that sense. So I'm going to go ahead and I think stop here, and I believe that will allow us plenty of time for some questions and discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that great presentation. We have one question in the chat so far. So, when considering a weakness, how can they be strengthened to be a strength?
All right. I love this question because this is a great example of how we are very much trained to want to take our weaknesses and create them into a strength. Now, what the strengths-based research really tells us is that instead of trying to make a weakness a strength, we want to really make sure we are identifying what we are already strong at. And it doesn't mean that our strength is maximized, and put our energy into those strengths to make them even better. When we look at weaknesses, it doesn't mean we ignore them, but maybe our goal is not to make a weakness a strength. It's to maybe lessen the roadblock effect of that weakness so that we are allowing our strengths to shine through. I can give you a pretty common example amongst our pharmacy students who really like to involve themselves in leadership. And sometimes they're jealous of other students or worried that they maybe don't have those public speaking skills, right? And they want to be the best public speaker because they know that they need to work on that. Well, communication skills, of course, are something to put our time and effort in, and there will be incremental improvements. So we can enhance that. But maybe that person actually is not, their strength isn't in public speaking, but maybe their strength is in those side conversations in the hallway and the empathy that they have with people one-on-one. And that is their leadership strength. They actually want to enhance that and make sure they recognize it so that they're not spending so much attention trying to be at a podium giving a lecture when they're missing out on the opportunity to do something they're so naturally good at, which is those hallway conversations and supporting people one-on-one. So that's just a good example that I can think of there.
Awesome. Thank you. We still have time for a few more questions. I'm just going to pause here. Feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat or in the Q&A box.
Guess I will stop my sharing so people can see me here.
Yep. Oh, here's another question.
Thank you for the next question there about acknowledging weaknesses in your letter. You know, I think that it's human nature. We all have something to work on. In your letter of intent, I think that you can really impress upon what you bring to the table and how that matches the program that you're looking for. In an interview, it is likely you'll be asked about weaknesses, maybe what you are needing to work on, let's say. And I think it's important to have some areas that you are knowing that you're working on and how proud you are of that. But in terms of a personal statement or a letter, you can just really impress upon what you are bringing to the table and how you're going to enhance that further because you're such a good match to the program and what they have to offer. All right, I see a couple more questions here. Expressing strengths in a personal statement would be just what I was talking about. That letter of intent or a personal statement would be very similar. And a weakness, can it ever be responsible for holding you back from finding success? I think that that's a pretty broad question, and I'm sure there's examples where that could. My guess is that sometimes if we focus too much on what we're not good at, we actually don't give ourselves enough confidence in what we bring to the table. And my goodness, I've worked with a lot of students over the years. I think everyone has strengths. And if we can really move our focus and our lens over to what we're good at and build upon that, it might take some coaching, right? It might not be something you can do for yourself, but being able to really be proud of what you bring to the table should be how you find your success, because then you want to embrace that and find opportunities that let you use it, not the jobs that require you to be good at something that you're just not even that engaged in. Oh, I love this question too. How can you avoid sounding repetitive when you feel many experiences have contributed to a single strength? I like that a lot. What you can do is you're mapping, you're going to have a lot of experiences to a single strength. You don't need to bring up all of those. Have your stories ready. And then when you hear an interview question, what will happen in your brain is you've already mapped it. So then you can pull from that menu of stories or experiences. And even just bringing up one, you've done the mind exercise to map it already. But then you want to listen in the interview for a natural opportunity to talk about maybe just one of those. And then as the conversation goes, if you layer in others, that's okay. But I'm really glad you asked that because there's no reason to answer one question with all the experiences. That's just your preparation in your mapping exercise, getting you ready for that interview.
Awesome questions.
Great questions.
We still have a minute left. Do we have any other questions?
Yes, hopefully this is happening right at the time when you're thinking through this. And really, hopefully, you can tell. I just want you to go into this process with confidence. All of you have something great. Keep that on the forefront. Put that on the front burner, right? You've done all the work. Let's capitalize on that.
Oh, we got one more question. How do you
Yeah,
put
putting
your strengths into less vague terms?
I think that no matter what language we're using, like curiosity, that could be seen as vague. What we're doing to make it less vague is connecting it to an experience. So the story you tell around how you use that curiosity and have it be authentic to you, that's how you make it less vague.
Awesome. And with that, I think we're right at time. Thank you so much, Erin, for this really great session. If anyone else has any more questions for Erin, please go to their expo booth, Midwestern University College of Pharmacy. And the next session won't start for another 15 minutes. So go and visit the booth of Erin or any of the other booths in the expo hall today. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us for this session, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks,
Bye
everyone.
all.
Good luck.